My name does not matter anymore. Names belong to the living, and I have not truly been alive for over 2 centuries. Still, sometimes I whisper it to myself in the dark, as if speaking it aloud will make it real again. As if the sound of syllables long forgotten could summon back a man who once walked under clean skies. But I was a man, once. Flesh whole, hair thick, eyes bright. I had a family, a house, a life that would sound impossibly ordinary now, in a world that measures time by ash and ruin. I was a technician for a power company, not glamorous work, but steady. I kept lights burning in houses, kept coffee pots warm, kept radios alive with the hum of current. My hands were calloused not from combat or survival, but from pulling cables, tightening bolts, and filling out forms in neat block letters. We thought the world was permanent. Our televisions told us America was stronger than ever, even as we watched foreign wars rage on black and white screens. Our streets were crowded with billboards promising security, strength, prosperity. We believed them because it was easier than admitting how fragile it all was. When I kissed my wife goodbye in the mornings, when I tucked my son into bed at night, I never thought the fabric of our lives could burn away in a single hour. The truth is, we did know. Every man and woman alive then carried that gnawing worry in the pit of their stomachs. The news of bombs in distant places, the shortages of oil, the tension with China, it was impossible to ignore. But we lived with it the way you live with a storm on the horizon. It might hit tomorrow, or it might sweep past, so you keep working, you keep eating, you keep laughing, because what else can you do? I remember the day before the end as clearly as I remember my own name. It was autumn, the kind where the air carried a crisp bite and the leaves outside my window burned red and gold. My wife made stew that evening. Brahmin didn't exist yet, so we ate beef from real cattle, thick chunks swimming in broth, bread warm from the oven. We ate together, all 3 of us. My boy chattering about school while I nodded and pretended to listen. My wife smiling faintly as she refilled our bowls. I would sell 100 years of this cursed life for one more of those dinners. The morning of the end, the siren screamed. You never forget that sound. It wasn't like a fire alarm or a tornado warning. It was a howl ripped from the throat of the world itself. Shrill and merciless, vibrating through your chest until your heart wanted to stop. People poured into the streets, some clutching suitcases, others clutching children. I remember standing frozen, my son's hand in mine, staring at the sky. The sky was so blue, clear as glass, the kind of morning where you could almost believe the world would last forever. Then the light came. It wasn't a single explosion. It was dozens, hundreds, suns blooming where no sun should be. A roar like the tearing of the heavens themselves, followed by a wind that stripped roofs from houses and flesh from bone. The horizon burned white, then orange, then black. I don't know how we survived. Perhaps we were far enough from the city center. Perhaps fate simply rolled its dice and spared us. I remember the blast slamming us to the floor, the air filling with heat and grit. I remember my wife screaming, my son crying, and the sound of glass shattering like rain. When the firestorm passed, the world was different. The sky was a sickly red, the air thick with ash. Where there had been neighbors' houses, there were only twisted frames. People staggered in the streets, their skin blistered, their eyes wide with shock. Some fell and did not rise again. We ran. There was nowhere to go, but instinct demanded movement. We clutched each other, stumbling through debris, coughing on smoke. I remember looking back and seeing the shape of my home sagging inward, flames curling through the windows. Every photograph, every keepsake, every scrap of the life we had built, gone in minutes. The days that followed blurred together in misery. Food ran out. Water turned foul. People grew sick. We scavenged from fallen stores, shared what little we found. Some still believed rescue would come, that the government would appear with trucks and supplies. Others knew better. There was no government left. The sickness came next. Hair falling in clumps, skin peeling, voices cracking. I remember holding my wife's hand as she vomited blood, whispering that she'd be all right, even as I watched her eyes sink deeper into her skull. My boy coughed until he couldn't breathe. We tried to find a doctor, but the doctors were gone too. And through it all, I endured. My body broke, but it did not stop. My skin sloughed off, but it clung to bone. My voice grew ragged, but still it spoke. I watched my wife waste away, her fingers thin as twigs in mine. Until one night, she didn't wake. I buried her in the ash. Though the ground was so hard, I could only heap rubble over her. My boy lasted a little longer, his eyes wide with terror every time he looked at me. "Papa," he whispered once, "why do you look like that?" I had no answer. The day I buried him, I realized I was not dying like the others. The sickness did not finish me. It transformed me. My skin yellowed and cracked. My hair fell in clumps until my head was bare. My voice became a rasping growl. Neighbors who once shared their food with me now recoiled in horror. One spat and called me a corpse that refused to lie down. That was the first time I heard the word Ghoul. I didn't understand it then. All I knew was that the fire had taken my family, my home, my world, but had left me behind to rot in a body that was no longer mine. I had survived the fire, but survival is not the same as living. I was alone, but I did not die. Instead, the sickness settled into me. My body hardened, twisted, preserved in a way that defied sense. The yellowed skin didn't rot further. The rasp in my voice deepened into permanence. The ache in my bones leveled into a steady throb, not unbearable but ever present. It was then I realized the truth. The radiation had not killed me. It had reshaped me. At first, I told myself I was still human. I still thought, still remembered, still dreamed of my wife's smile and my boy's laughter. Surely humanity was more than flesh. But when I caught my reflection in a shard of broken glass, I saw the corpse stare of eyes sunk deep into cracked skin, a mouth twisted into a rictus grin no longer meant for joy. Humanity might have still lived inside, but the shell was something else entirely. I found others like me in the ruins, men and women whose skin bore the same mottled texture, whose voices rasped the same hollow tones. Some huddled together in groups, clinging to scraps of memory. Others wandered aimlessly, eyes vacant. And some had already slipped. I'll never forget the first feral I saw. He had once been a shopkeeper. I remembered his face, his apron, the way he used to whistle when sweeping his storefront. But when I found him, weeks after the bombs, he was gone. His body moved, but without thought. His mouth opened in a scream that was no longer words. His eyes, once kind, were wild and empty. He lunged at me with nails cracked into claws. I fled. My legs carried me faster than I thought possible. I hid among the ruins, heart pounding, ears filled with the echo of that mindless shriek. It wasn't just death that stalked us now. It was the loss of self. That was the terror greater than the fire, greater than the hunger, greater than the loneliness. Not dying, not rotting, forgetting. Would I wake one morning with no memory of my name? Would I turn my head and see a stranger in the glass? Would I charge at others like a beast, hunger in my belly where memory once lived? I carried that fear like a brand. Every cough, every lapse in thought, every dreamless night felt like the beginning of the end. But I endured. Days stretched into months, months into years. My body decayed no further. My mind held its shape. The radiation that had turned my neighbors to dust had left me in this limbo. Not alive, not dead, not human, not corpse. I had become something new, something that had no place in the world that remained. It didn't take long for the living to make their judgment. At first, I stayed close to the ruins of home, hoping someone, anyone, would come back. Survivors trickled through in the weeks after the bombs. We shared scraps of food, built fires from broken furniture, whispered prayers into the ash-filled air. For a while, I believed I might still belong among them. But the looks grew colder. When I approached a campfire, conversation would falter. When I reached for a shared pot, hands would hesitate before passing it. Mothers pulled their children close when I walked past. Some spat when my shadow fell across their blankets. "Monster," they whispered. "Rotting freak. Corpse that won't lie down." The words cut deeper than hunger. Hunger gnaws at the belly, but rejection gnaws at the soul. I tried to explain. "I'm still me," I rasped. "I remember. I think. I hurt. Doesn't that make me human?" But my voice only deepened their fear. That rasping growl was no longer the voice of a man. It was the voice of the grave. One night, I returned to the fire to find my bedroll gone, my meager belongings scattered into the dirt. "You don't belong here," a man spat. His eyes were hard, his jaw set. Others nodded. Some wouldn't meet my gaze. "Go, before we make you." I looked around, searching for one friendly face. I found none. Even those who once shared food with me looked away. I realized then that no argument, no plea, no memory would change their minds. My body had judged me guilty in their eyes. I was no longer one of them. So I left. I walked into the wastes, the firelight shrinking behind me, the cold air biting at skin that no longer felt pain the same way it once had. The silence pressed down like a weight, heavier than any hunger. I had thought loneliness was a wound. I learned that it was a disease, slow and incurable. In the months that followed, I wandered from settlement to settlement. Always the same story. At best, fear. At worst, violence. A farmer once let me drink from his well, but when his daughter saw me, she screamed and called me a demon. He raised his shotgun and fired into the dirt at my feet. "Don't come back," he warned, his voice shaking more than his hands. In another town, a group of men cornered me. They hurled stones, screaming that I was cursed, that my presence would bring sickness. One struck my temple, and though the skin split, no blood flowed. That only deepened their terror. I ran, the sound of their shouts following me long into the night. And yet, rejection wasn't the worst of it. The worst was when I saw pity. Once a young woman offered me bread. She handed it over without a word, but her eyes said everything. She wasn't feeding a man. She was feeding a stray. A pitiful animal too wretched to leave to die. I ate the bread, but the taste turned to ash in my mouth. The cruelty of being shunned is not in the words or the stones. It is in the way you begin to believe them. Each whisper of monster, each flinch, each look of pity drives a wedge deeper into your mind until you start to wonder if perhaps they're right. Perhaps you are no longer human. Perhaps you are just a corpse walking on borrowed time. I clung to my memories then, to my wife's laugh, to my boy's smile, to the smell of stew in autumn. They were my proof, my anchor. If I could remember those things, then surely I was still human. Surely. But the farther I walked, the fewer remembered me. The old world faded from their stories, replaced by new struggles, new scars. Only I carried the weight of the past, and no one wanted it. To the living, I was a reminder of what they feared most, that survival might one day twist them into something unrecognizable. They shunned me not only for what I was, but for what I represented. And so, step by step, rejection by rejection, I learned the truth. I would walk this world alone. When the living turned their faces away, I expected to find solace among those who shared my affliction. It made sense in some cruel logic of the wastes. If the humans would not have you, then go to the others who had been spared the final mercy. I followed rumors into basements, into subway mouths, into ruined basements behind storefronts where the light could not find them. I learned quickly that the dead gather where the living dare not go. The first group I found called themselves a commune, though there was nothing suburban about it. It was a congregation of broken song and scavenged warmth. 24 of us, men and women and a few children-shaped things who sat very still, pressed together in a hollowed train car. We shared heat, whatever food could be coaxed into taste, and small ceremonies that tried to stitch dignity over our raggedness. A man named Heron kept a battered harmonica and played until the note gave out. A woman called May kept accounts in a torn notebook, tallying who came and who left, like a priest of memory. They treated me as they treated everyone, with cautious hospitality, an exchange of looks and measures that said, "We are broken in similar ways. You may stay until we test your hunger." For a few months, there was a brittle peace. We traded stories about names that had once fit us, jobs, loves, stupid things that made us laugh when laughter was allowed. We wrote dates on the backs of crates and crossed them off when a supply run succeeded. In the dark, when the world outside made its jealous noises, we became a community of ghosts with hands that still did work. But there is a patience in the wounds that will not be fooled. I watched some of them slide, not all at once, not theatrically, but like a page curling at the edge and then the page falling away, eyes first. The glance that no longer found the horizon but fixed on a single point, as if the person had been listening to something only they could hear. Words followed, not missing at first, but rearranged, illogical, a string gone loose from the loom. Once the speech unmade itself, the rest came easier. The shivering, the sudden irritability, the surges of violence that frightened even seasoned survivors. And then there were the ferals. They are what happens when memory frays until there is nothing left to hold it. One day they are my neighbor, the next they are a predator you cannot reason with. The first feral I saw had been a baker. I remembered his laugh. I remembered his bread. He came toward me in the tunnel a year after the bombs, his hands curled into claws, his mouth a terrible grin. For a moment I thought I could speak. Call him by an old name, ground him with history. Instead he lunged, and the bakery of his memory roared like a furnace and swallowed everything in sight. Watching a feral tear a living scavenger apart is an experience that drills into your bones. It is not the sound. It is the shift in their eyes. The flatness that says a person is leaving the room. Afterwards, the survivors who watched will whisper that the feral was born out of hunger or loneliness. And perhaps they are right. Hunger, though, does not explain the way they sometimes turn on other ghouls, like rage pirouetting into self-loathing. They rip at us with a ferocity that suggests a fury at whatever shackled them to memory in the first place. Among the non-feral ghouls, there is a ritual, a daily anchoring we repeat to fend off the slide. Names are said aloud each morning as though declaring ownership of what is left of you. We touch our palms to the earth and say where we were born, who fed us our first meal, who laughed when we broke a window as boys. We list the colors of our first house, the smell of the first bread we ever burned. It's childish work, repetition against the dark, but it is all we have. Some of us keep talismans, lockets with nothing in them but weight, a photograph browned to transparency, a toy with a missing eye. May kept a photograph of a baby leaning against a radiator. She would trace the outline of a cheek until her hand shook. The fear isn't only losing names. It is discovering, day by day, that the things you remember are no longer shared by anyone else. I can say my wife's full name and the ingredients of her stew and the cadence of her laugh. And the only echo will come from the puppeting wind. Other ghouls can confirm the existence of a family or a street or a market stall. But as generations of the living die and new ones grow, our memories become a private museum where no one comes to look. And then there are moral ruptures. Some of us, call them the practical ones, argue that the ferals are a problem to be solved mechanically. They scout with sharpened sticks and throw Molotovs when the pack draws near. Others, the old romantics, believe that a feral is a person in torment and must be put down gently, if at all. These debates fray friendships. There is a cold calculus you don't expect to learn. How much to save? How much to slough off as inevitable attrition in a world no longer built for us? I remember a night a feral walked into our station like a bad memory come to life. It was dusk. The tunnels shuddered with distant thunder, and Heron was playing his harmonica, the note thin and precarious. The feral moved slow at first, an awkward gait. Then it found its balance and launched. Chaos collapsed the small dignity of that car. Chairs turned over, someone's small shrine crushed under a foot, prayers cut off mid-plea. We fought it with crowbars and knives. We should have killed it swiftly. Instead, we hesitated, and that hesitation cost us 2 lives and a friend's mind. When it was over, with the feral burned and dragged away on a blanket, we sat and counted what we had lost, not only flesh, but something warmer, belief that our rituals held any sway. After that, the community thinned. Some moved into the tunnels deeper, trying to hide from the sun because sunlight seemed to unnerve them. Others ascended, convinced that above-ground air would stitch them back into what they had been. I remained where I could monitor comings and goings, where I could guard the harmonica in Heron's pocket and trace May's ledger with a finger when the light allowed. There is a loneliness to living among your kind that is sharper than anything I experienced with the living. The feral threat is constant and intimate. You fear not only that you will be hunted by them, but that you will become one of them. Every time a friend loses a word or a memory, you hold your breath and wait for the next slide. You learn to be kind in small measures. Supply a loaf, fix a wheel, trade a tale. But you also learn to pack a knife and sleep with the fire between you and the shadow. We survive in compartments now. Small groups, tight rituals, watch rotations. We barter our small comforts for safety. And when sleep finally comes, it comes with one eye open, listening for any sound that indicates that the dead are collapsing into something harder and crueler than they were before. To be among the dead is to walk a razor edge between kinship and extinction. We are comforted by one another and terrified for what we see reflected back. The greatest cruelty of the wastes is not being loathed by the living. It is the knowledge that your own kind may one day greet you as prey. Time stopped meaning the same for me after the first decade. Days folded into each other like pages of an old book left in the sun, seasons blurred into a single weather pattern of ash and wind. People measure life by anniversaries, by the smell of rain after long drought, by the rhythm of crops. I measured it by the tolling of safeties and the number of towns that would throw me out at the first whisper of trouble. For a while I tried to stay. I would find a place that took pity, or practicality, on a screwy old ghoul who could mend radios and patch roofs. In Centerton, I repaired a community's windmill and was allowed a corner in the communal hall. In that time, I ate warm bread and listened to children run. And I foolishly began to think I could belong again. Belonging ends with a rumor. A child disappears, a cow is found with its throat torn, or a woman suddenly collapses with a fever she'd not had the day before, and eyes swivel toward the most comfortable scapegoat. To be different in a world that fears difference is to be the first suspect. Once a rumor gets traction, the rational machinery of survival grinds out righteous anger, and you are out the gate with a torch in some hand held by someone who used to nod at you kindly. I learned strategies. Don't linger in markets. Take work that keeps you at the edges, mending fences, fixing wind vanes, sealing roofs. Accept the odd jobs and do them so well, your name becomes less of an omen and more of a labor tag. When you find a friend who offers you water, do not confess too much. Say small things. I used to fix radios. They will nod and be grateful. Let them think you are harmless. Be harmless until you are not. But harmlessness is a brittle covering. It breaks. People are hungry and afraid, and fear eats reasoning for breakfast. I remember a night at Shale's End as if it were a ritual of humiliation. The town had let me live on the edge. I fixed the radio antenna every other week and laid in a small stock of canned fruit in exchange. The mayor's daughter vanished for 2 days. She was found out where the old mill crested the ridge, dead, hands clawed at the soil. Accusations need only a crooked smile and a frightened witness. The mayor's men bristled. Someone threw a brick that shattered glass on my door. There were no accusations from the mouth of law. There was the fury of the mob. I spoke, pleaded my innocence, but words are slippery in the dark. They took me to the gate with shouts and pointed fingers. A shotgun cracked the night as signal, and I was left bleeding on the road with a farewell I would not hear repeated as kindness. I have been a craftsman, a beggar, a ghost of the footpath. I have lived in empty factories and beneath broken bridges. I have traded stories for a bowl of stew and pieced together radios for a handful of caps and the odd smile. I have learned how to make myself small. I learned which roads to travel in daylight and which at night. I learned to listen for the particular cadence of voices that carry lies. I learned to sleep with one ear on the world and the other on my chest. But above all, I learned to keep memories safe. Memory is my capital. It is all I have that rises above barter. I carry the smell of coffee from a morning 2 centuries gone the way a rich man carries coin. When I meet a child who is curious or kind, I tell a story that stitches like a warming hand, the sound of a steam whistle, the way a mother hummed when she kneaded dough, the precise way light fell on a kitchen table at 6 in the evening. Children sometimes sit and listen with big, dumb faces of belief. Sometimes, older men will press a crust into my hand and say, "Keep the stories." Those are the small mercies. There are times the road brings me into the orbit of legends. Towns tell of the man who was a courier, the woman who held the institute at bay, the soldier who planted a flag and moved a mountain. I heard the songs about them, their deeds magnified into myth. I once crossed paths, only a shadow and a loaf between us, with a courier whose name was loudly praised at a junction. He did not see me. He was wrapped in his own legend. To him, I was another shade on the periphery. Legends do not have room for the old men who remember the names of dogs in the courtyards they stormed. The world remembers what it wants. Sometimes people ask why I keep walking. Why not join a caravan or settle with a tribe? There are small reasons and large ones. Small reasons. Caravans sleep half the time, and the other half they count trust like currency. Tribes have strong rules and stranger rules. Scare me. Settlements ask for promises I cannot honestly keep. The large reason is worse and simpler. I am afraid of two things. One is that I will become like the ferals, and I fear what will follow my hands when they no longer remember the shape of words. The other is being bound to a place that will burn or freeze, or be taken, and to have no choice but stand and be taken with it. The wanderer can leave. The settled cannot always. At night, when the furnace of day dies, I sit under a broken billboard and write names into my notebook. Names of people I loved until the world took them from me. I press the ink into paper, and the letters smell like a life I could have carried on. The notebook is small and dog-eared, pages filled with memories and grocery lists and a child's doodle that I will keep until the paper shreds to nothing. I read sometimes out loud in the dark, and the sound of my voice reading the names is a liturgy to keep self intact. There are moments when despair weighs like the worst hunger. I see a child playing, and I am moved to tears because I remember the same thing. A stick used to stir soil into soup, a scrape on a knee, a lullaby hummed too softly. I envy the young their ignorance. I envy them because they will not be tormented by remembering what once was. Envy is perverse. It thrives in the cold places of the heart. Yet still I walk. I step over bones carted by rust wind. I pass villages with smoking chimneys, and I count the ways memory keeps me from curling into a sack of ash. I keep the small rules. Never draw attention. Always have a route. Never sleep in the same place twice. Never trust a man who smiles too wide at midnight. I keep the stories, because when I lose all else, memory is the map that shows me where I have been, and perhaps where I might go. There is no final plan. There is only the road and the small decisions taken day by day. If a town is kind, I stay. If it is cruel, I leave. If I am hungry, I take a chance. If I find someone to whom I can tell a story without being laughed at, I will sit by the fire and unspool my history until the embers die. That is enough for now. The long wandering is not an adventure. It is a habit born of exile. I walk because it is what I do. I remember because it is what I am. There are days when the world feels younger than me. That is the curse of this existence. The body rots, the voice cracks, but the mind refuses to let go. Where others die and their memories go with them, mine remain, circling like vultures that will not leave the carcass. I remember too much. The living envy ghouls for their longevity. They imagine eternity as a treasure chest of extra years. as if we spend the centuries wisely, gathering wisdom, becoming sages. But immortality is not wisdom, it is weight. Every year is another stone tied to your chest, dragging you further down into the mire of recollection. I remember the day I first tasted ice cream, pistachio, green as spring leaves, cold enough to sting my teeth. I remember the hum of streetcars as I walked to work, the smell of hot asphalt rising in the summer heat. I remember the sound of my son's laughter as he tried to skip stones across the river, failing miserably but smiling like a conqueror. And I remember the bombs, always the bombs. The flash, the roar, the screams, the way my wife's hand shook in mine as the sirens wailed. The terror in my son's eyes as he asked if it would be all right. His voice has never left me. Sometimes I hear it in the middle of the night, whispering through the ruins like a ghost that refuses to rest. The cruelest part is that the memories do not fade. Most people grow old and forget. Their minds soften. The sharp edges of pain blur. They lose the details, and in losing them, they are spared. I am not spared. I remember every word, every touch, every sound. My mind is a vault with no lock, preserving horrors that should have been allowed to decay. Worse still, I remember things no one else does. Ask the settlers about the world before, and you'll get stories passed down like myths. Clean water in every home, cars that moved without Brahmin, skies without dust. To them, it's legend. To me, it's yesterday. I tell them sometimes, when they'll listen. I describe radios playing swing music on a Sunday morning. I describe the taste of fruit grown in soil not poisoned by fallout. I describe baseball games, real ones, not the savage blood sport that's taken its place. Some look at me with awe, as though I'm a relic of history come alive. Others laugh, convinced I'm lying, spinning fantasies to earn sympathy. The children never know what to make of me. Once, a boy asked what clouds looked like before the war. I told him they were the same. White, gray, stormy, beautiful, but he frowned. He wanted magic. He wanted dragons or floating cities. The truth disappointed him. Sometimes I wonder if I should start lying. Maybe the past would be easier to bear if I twisted it into something brighter. But lies are fragile, and memories are strong. The truth remains, unchanging, like scars carved into stone. I've met other ghouls who embrace forgetting. They drink themselves into stupors, swallow chems until their minds blur, anything to silence the chorus of recollection. Some beg for death, tired of carrying the weight. Others wander into feral packs willingly, choosing madness over memory. I can't. For all the pain it brings, I can't let go. These memories are all I have left of the people I loved. My wife's laugh, my son's smile, the warmth of their hands. If I let those fade, then they die a second death. I won't let that happen. I can't. So I carry it, all of it. The joy and the grief, the sweetness and the sorrow. I carry it like a penance, a punishment for surviving when they didn't. I carry it because someone has to. If the world forgets everything, then what was the point of surviving at all? Yet sometimes, in the quiet of night, I envy the ferals. They forget. They lose the burden. Their screams are hollow, their minds empty. But they don't carry the past. They don't wake trembling from dreams of firestorms and funerals. They don't relive the moment their child died in their arms. Perhaps one day, I'll envy them enough to join them. But not yet. Not while I can still write, still speak, still remember. For as long as I can, I will bear witness. Because memories, no matter how cruel, are the only proof that I ever lived. If rejection was the first cruelty the wasteland dealt me, then exploitation was the second. It happened more than once, in different places, with different faces, but always the same lesson. To many, I was not a man. I was a specimen. The first time was years after the bombs. I stumbled into a settlement built around the skeleton of an old hospital. The people there smiled, offered me water, even let me rest in a cot for the night. I thought I had finally found kindness. But when I awoke, my wrists were bound, and the smell of disinfectant burned my nostrils. The doctors, if they could be called that, hovered over me with hungry eyes. They prodded my skin, took samples of my blood, measured the depth of my scars. Fascinating, one muttered. Cellular degradation without termination. Extraordinary. They spoke of me as though I were a machine they'd salvaged, not a man listening to every word. Days blurred into weeks. They tested my pain tolerance, my endurance, my reaction to radiation. They fed me scraps only when they needed me alive. One even joked about dissecting me to see how deep the rot goes. I begged, I shouted, I cursed, but none of it mattered. To them, I was data, a curiosity. I escaped only because they grew careless. One night, a guard left my restraints loose. I broke free, killed him with a chair leg, and ran until my lungs felt like ash. I never looked back. But it wasn't the last time. The Enclave hunted ghouls like me. To them, we were abominations, proof of impurity. I was captured once, dragged into a lab where men in white coats whispered about studies and decontamination. They strapped me to a table and spoke of cleansing the world of my kind. I spat in their faces and told them to burn. They would have dissected me if not for an attack that tore through the facility. I crawled out through fire and gunfire, half dead but free. Not all exploiters wore uniforms. Some were just desperate men with greed in their eyes. Raiders once captured me, hoping to sell me to some back-alley chemist. They called me radiation on legs and tried to bleed me into bottles, swearing my blood could be sold as a cure or a poison, depending on the market. I killed them in the dark of their camp, one by one, their screams drowned by the wasteland's endless wind. And yet, each time, I was reminded of the same truth. I am not seen as human, not by the scientists, not by the soldiers, not by the scavengers with too much hunger and not enough conscience. To them, I am a tool, a subject, a monster to be studied or sold. Sometimes I wonder if they're right. My body does not age like theirs. My skin does not bleed like theirs. My mind carries centuries when theirs carry decades. Perhaps I am not human anymore. Perhaps I am something else. Something that can never be understood except under a scalpel. But I feel pain. I feel sorrow. I feel hunger, loneliness, rage. I remember love. I remember loss. If that is not human, then what is? Still, the world does not care for my feelings. It cares only for what it can take. My resilience makes me a prize for those who see in me not a man, but an opportunity. And so I walk, wary of kindness, wary of hospitality, wary of any hand offered without reason. Because I know what often waits behind the smile. Chains, cages, scalpels. The wasteland is full of predators, and sometimes the worst are not the ones with claws and teeth. They are the ones with notebooks, with scalpels. with ambition. And for them, I will always be prey. Wandering as long as I have, you see people who shine like flares against the endless dark. I do not mean leaders of small towns or petty raider chiefs. I mean the ones the wasteland will never forget, the legends. The stories reach you before the people ever do. They come carried on the wind, in the mouths of traders, etched in the songs sung by drifters around fires. They grow larger with each retelling, inflated by awe and fear, until you wonder if the person even exists at all. And then, sometimes, you meet them. I once crossed paths with the lone wanderer, or at least, I believe I did. I was in the capital wasteland, scavenging an old gas station for wiring. A figure passed on the road, armor patched with scavenged plates, rifle slung across the back. Pip-Boy glowing faintly in the dusk. They nodded to me, nothing more, a gesture so small it might have meant nothing. But I had heard enough stories to know. The vault dweller who strode from 101, who walked into fire and came out holding hope in both hands. The one who brought water to the dying, who toppled monsters in steel. That nod was all I needed. For a moment, I felt as though the centuries of misery mattered less. For a moment, I believed someone was still out there fighting for a better world. Then, they were gone, and the road was just the road again. In the Mojave, years later, I heard whispers of the Courier, a wanderer who carried a package and, in doing so, remade an entire desert. They said he could not be killed, that he walked away from bullets to the skull, that he bent armies to his will, with words or with fire. I never saw him with my own eyes, but I saw what he left behind. Towns reborn, flags torn down and replaced, the bones of legionnaires scattered in the sand. Wherever I wandered in that desert, his shadow lay across it. The wasteland adores legends because they make sense of chaos. Raiders come and go, famine strikes, storms tear down shelters, but a legend feels eternal. They give people something to believe in. The lone wanderer bringing water, the courier reshaping nations, the sole survivor rising from Vault 111 to challenge the Institute. To the common folk, these are proof that one person can still matter. But to me, legends are a cruel reminder, because I will never be one. I walk the same roads, I fight the same battles against hunger, thirst, and despair. But when I arrive in towns, no one sings. No one carves my name into stone. They look at me and see a corpse. They tell their children to stay away, that I'm dangerous. I have survived longer than most legends, but survival without glory is just exile stretched thin. Sometimes I wonder what it must be like to live as they do, to have your name spoken with reverence, to have people rally to your side, to be welcomed wherever you go, to be remembered not as a freak, but as a savior. And yet, I've also seen the toll it takes. Legends burn bright, but the brighter the flame, the shorter the life. The lone wanderer vanished into history. The stories grew quiet, and no one knows if they still live. The courier disappeared into the Mojave's storms. The sole survivor walked the Commonwealth and left it scarred forever. But even they will one day fade, their deeds twisted into myth until truth and lie are indistinguishable. Perhaps it is better not to be remembered at all. Still, when I meet them, when their eyes pass over me and I see recognition, however brief, I feel something stir. A memory of being seen as human. A moment when, Even in my cracked skin and rasping voice, I am acknowledged as a fellow traveler. Not legend, not corpse, just alive. And in this endless exile, that is enough. Of all the torments this half-life brings, none gnaws deeper than the fear of going feral. It hangs over every ghoul like a noose. The slow slip into madness, the erasure of self. The moment when memory surrenders to hunger and screams. We speak of it in whispers, as though giving it voice will hasten its arrival. We pretend not to notice when a friend stares too long at nothing, when they forget their own name, when their words tangle into nonsense. But we notice. Oh, we notice. I have watched it happen too many times. May, who kept her ledger so carefully, one day forgot the letters on the page. She traced her fingers over them as if they were alien symbols. Within weeks, her speech unraveled. Soon she no longer spoke at all, only growled. We tried to keep her close, tried to remind her of who she was. But it was no use. One night she lunged at Heron, teeth bared. We held her down, wept as we ended it. When we buried her, we did not use her name. She was already gone. Every ghoul carries their own ritual of defiance. Some recite their names each morning. Some sing songs from their childhood. Some write diaries until their fingers can no longer hold a pen. I cling to memory, forcing myself to recall details no one else alive remembers. The color of my wife's eyes, the pattern on my son's bed sheets, the sound of swing music on the radio. These things tether me. If I forget them, I fear I will lose myself too. But there are cracks. Sometimes I wake and cannot remember where I am. The landscape blurs, the centuries bleed together. I wander through ruins and feel as though I have walked them 100 times. Yet I cannot recall when. Days vanish, lost to the fog. I write to anchor myself, but the ink fades, the paper tears, and I wonder if my mind will follow. What terrifies me most is not death. Death is final, merciful. What terrifies me is to keep walking without mind, without memory, without self. To scream endlessly in the ruins, hunting the living, tearing at them not out of malice, but out of emptiness. To become the very thing I fear and never even know it. I envy the living their mortality. They fear death, but they do not fear losing themselves while their bodies still move. They end as they lived, human. We ghouls are not afforded such dignity. Our bodies persist, but our minds rot. We are not promised an ending, only a decline. There are nights when I consider ending it myself. A bullet to the brain, a knife to the throat, a plunge into radiation too deep even for me. Better to choose my death than let the fall choose me. Better to end with memory intact, to carry my family's faces into the dark rather than forget them. But then I hesitate. Perhaps tomorrow I will find a place that welcomes me. Perhaps tomorrow I will tell my story to someone who believes. Perhaps tomorrow I will feel human again, if only for a breath. That hope, fragile as it is, keeps the gun barrel away from my temple. Still, the fear does not leave. It walks with me, a shadow I cannot shake. Every forgotten word, every slip of memory, every vacant stare in the mirror feels like a step closer to the edge. I know one day it will claim me. One day I will wake with no past, no name, no self. One day I will scream into the ruins, not knowing why. And when that day comes, I pray someone will put me down. Quickly, kindly, before I hurt anyone else, before I become a monster in truth. Until then, I write. I speak, I remember, I endure, because as long as I can still hold on to who I am not yet lost. I have walked this ruined earth longer than I ever lived in the old world. My body is cracked and yellowed, my voice a rasp, my soul stitched together by memories I can neither share nor set down. Still, I endure. Still, I remember. And so I write these words, not for myself, but for you, the living, the fragile, the ones who still dare to call yourselves human without hesitation. Because one day, you may become me. Do not flinch, do not laugh, do not shake your head and say, never, not me. I said the same once. I believed death would come swiftly if the bombs fell. I believed sickness would take me like it took my wife, my child, my neighbors. But fate is not fair. Fate is not merciful. Fate spares in strange ways, and it may yet spare you in the same way it spared me. And if it does, you will learn what I have learned. Survival is not life. It is exile stretched thin. Listen well. When the bombs fall, when the fire burns, you will stagger from the ruins, choking on smoke. Your skin will blister, your hair will fall, your voice will rasp. And if you are cursed with endurance, you will not die. You will change. Slowly at first, hair thinning, skin splitting, voice hollowing, until you look into a mirror and no longer see yourself. The face staring back will be a stranger, a corpse that still breathes, a mask carved by radiation's cruel hands. The living will recoil. They will call you monster, rot, walking corpse. They will spit when you approach. Some will hurl stones. Some will take up arms. A few may offer pity, but pity burns worse than hatred. You will be reminded at every turn that you are not one of them, not anymore. So you will seek out your own kind, and you will find them, in tunnels, in ruins, in the dark corners of the wasteland. They will welcome you for a time. You will share stories, trade scraps, sit together in silence. But always, always, the shadow will hang above you, the fall into ferality. You will see it happen. You will watch friends lose themselves. First a word forgotten, then a name, then a face. Until nothing remains but hunger and screams, you will fight them. You will bury them. And each time you will wonder, when will it be me? And it will be. That is the truth we carry. The truth I cannot soften for you. Immortality is not a gift. It is a waiting game, a long road that leads only to madness. We remember too much until memory itself is a weight that cracks the mind. And when the mind shatters, what remains is not human. So why do I write? Why do I bother warning you when the path is inevitable? Because there are still choices to be made. You, the living, have the gift of death. Treasure it. Fear it if you must, but understand that it is mercy. To live and end as yourself is the greatest grace the wasteland allows. Do not squander it. Do not seek to prolong it with machines, with chems, with desperate bargains. You may envy me for my centuries, but I would trade them all for one more day, as I once was. And if you meet one of us, if you see the cracked skin, the hollow eyes, the rasping voice, remember this. We are not monsters by choice. We are survivors, cursed by fate. We carry memories no one else can bear, scars no one else can see. Treat us with dignity, if you can. Spare us if we fall. I have walked with legends. I have seen the lone wanderer pass by, the courier's shadow stretch across the desert, the sole survivor carve scars into the Commonwealth. They are remembered in songs and stories. I am not. I never will be. But that is all right. Not every survivor needs to be a legend. Some of us exist only to remind the world of what it once was, and what it may yet become. If you hear my words, if this diary reaches your hands, take them as both testimony and warning. Testimony that ghouls are not beyond humanity, even when the world says otherwise. Warning darts, that the line between human and monster is thinner than you think, because one day, it may be you. And when it is, remember this: hold on to your memories. They are your tether, your anchor, your proof of self. Write them down, sing them aloud, whisper them in the dark, do whatever you must to keep them alive. Because when the memories die, you die. What remains is only the husk. I do not know how much longer I can endure. Perhaps years, perhaps decades. Perhaps I will outlast all who read this. Or perhaps tomorrow I will wake and find nothing behind my eyes but hunger. If that day comes, and you meet me in the ruins, do not hesitate. End it quickly, kindly. Let me go with the dignity the world has already denied me. Until then, I walk. I remember. I endure. My name does not matter. My face does not matter. Only the warning matters. I am a ghoul. I am what happens when survival goes too far.